G'day everyone and welcome to Talking Leadership. This is Eric Perez welcoming you back to our ongoing podcast around this thing called leadership. Today's podcast guest is the Regional Manager in the Department of Industry, Science, Energy and Resources, amongst wearing a number of other hats in terms of industry innovation, connecting with industry on behalf of the federal government. Can I welcome to the podcast Mr. Tim Cotter. How are you, Tim?
Nice to speak with you, Eric.
Tim, thank you for joining me today. So look, I will start the podcast where I start always by asking, in which industry did you first take on, I guess, a leadership role, and why did you take that role on, mate?
Look, it's probably a multi-part answer, and you'll hear probably from me today a bit that I wear a number of hats. And so even in terms of leadership, I would suggest perhaps the first industry was in sports. And that was my outside of work. I've always been a keen AFL person, born and raised in Victoria. Played some reasonable football at some clubs around Victoria, Canberra, and elsewhere. And you work your way towards leadership roles within sporting teams in terms of leadership group, captain, then became captain coach and coaching sides where you're mentoring players anywhere from 15 to 45. So that's probably where I got my first taste of leadership experience was sporting field. But more so, it's been with my role within the department. I've worked with the division Oz Industry for now, almost 15 years. Whilst I've been in that role for a long time, I've had opportunities to use my leadership skills, be it what they are, but also looked beyond the department and where I can make an influence in the regions that I'm based. As I've moved around a little bit between Melbourne, Canberra, up in New England, up in Tamworth, and now down in the Hunter, where there's been opportunities for me to sort of test some leadership skills. So I've done a little bit of work with innovation field and in particular also sustainability. So that, a bit of a broad cross-section of areas that I've been able to use my leadership.
Just to unpack that a little bit, one of the questions that I've been asking people that on these podcasts that have mentioned that they're applying their leadership skills in multiple settings, what can you say about drawing from, say, your experience in leadership in the sporting arena to the work field? And why I asked that and why I have an interest in that is that I understand the passion that goes into a sport, and particularly coaching, because I myself do some coaching of futsal, not at the level that you're saying you're coaching at, which I will hopefully get to one day. But yeah, do you draw from that sporting arena any leadership qualities that you take in other areas of your work life?
So many areas, in particular being a coach of a team, the performance of the side and skills acquisition. If I was going to put a percentage chart on that, it's 10 to 15%. There's so much work to be done in terms of setting a common purpose towards the team, providing mentoring, dealing with challenges that the players might be facing at any time and at any point. I do both junior and senior club coaching, and so then you have the various differences between, you get the fun time where you're also dealing with the parents and guardians of those children at the same time. You've got young boys finishing high school, moving across the transition to university, getting their first job. Then you've got players who might be having children. They're just, it's the same as any workplace, but it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. And, I learn a lot of lessons from my sports and try to, where I can, bring them across into, my volunteer roles that I do within innovation and sustainability, but more, obviously in my day job and the sorts of people that I work for and the sorts of things that I do.
In your experience, Tim, do you believe that there's a difference between leadership and management in your travels?
I do, yes. And whilst I may not, my title's regional manager, so it suggests that I'm managing, I've found over time that I'm probably a better leader than a manager. And the key difference for that is I have significant levels of enthusiasm, energy, drive, and when I get pretty keen on something, and I think my daughter talks about this at school, passion projects. So when I get a passion project in front of me, I'm a bit of a tornado. And so what I find is I've got the ability to set the vision on where we want to head and draw people in, perhaps with some of my enthusiasm, and work towards that common goal. So, I'm good establishing something, setting the goalpost, striving towards getting it. But the minute detail, I need some help with that. And that's the management part where people will often, lots of people start projects, but in terms of finishing them, I think that's where the management part of it comes into it. So, I have some good leadership qualities. I have some management skills, but making them both work at the same time, I think, is always a challenge. I talked about sporting parlance earlier. the leader, perhaps it's strange. The captain of a football team generally runs out first, and that's sort of a management job. Whereas I would have thought the leader probably comes out last. You're setting your troops in, and you're following them out to battle. So as captain, I probably wasn't first out the gate most times. I was setting someone else up and perhaps providing them opportunities. No man's an island. I think it's very important that you, when you're in a position of whether it's a position of trust or a position of responsibility, make sure that you're not there forever to, really bring that next group through. And that's perhaps a little bit of a joint leadership and management role, is to lead and inspire, but also be working towards bringing the next generation through.
Really appreciate that response, because it ties into something around transitioning people to take more responsibility for what they're doing by setting an example. Let's go to something a little controversial, I guess, but something that most leaders have to deal with. So leaders sometimes make mistakes. So how do you engage with a mistake that's attributed to your leadership, Tim?
Oh, look, and if someone says they haven't made a mistake, well, they probably just haven't heard about it, or they don't know about it. We all make mistakes. We all make judgment calls and things. In terms of what you do in terms of a problem, one of the bits of work I did at one stage, where I was actually going through an MBA study externally through University of New England, and one particular topic and interest area for mine was in and around what you do with complaints. And, yes, that might relate back in some way to mistakes. So what do you do in terms of service recovery? And so the point I'm trying to get to is where I have made mistakes and people hopefully let me know about it, or I self-identify, they are such a good opportunity to do the service recovery sort of process. So you've identified it or someone's pointed it out for you. It really is a gift. It's an opportunity for you sometimes to, if there's people involved in it, you can make people become evangelists for the things that you might have stuffed up in the first place. So I'm really thankful when people poke a hole in something or give me a nudge and say, think about that one, because then you can, perhaps open up to more voices, have a look at maybe a different approach to doing things, and learning from your mistakes has got to be why you get up in the morning. If you're perfect, you just lay in bed and count your money. But everybody's got to get up and hopefully get better each and every day, which is the challenge of life. But that's what I enjoy, is having a crack. And as I sort of say quite regularly these days, there's a long-winded quote about the fact of the person that's in the stadium having a go, and I'd rather roll up the sleeves and have a crack and give a bit, and maybe take a couple of cuts and bruises and a few mistakes on the way through, but learn from it. I'd rather have a crack like that than be on the sidelines naysaying and the expression I've heard recently, I've got no bandwidth. I'm too busy. We're all busy people. Want something to happen, get in, have a crack. You might make a mistake, you might have some people offside, but for me, I just, if the ambition that I'm headed towards is a good one and is pure and nobody gets hurt on the way through, yes, there might be mistakes, but have a go and maybe learn from those mistakes. That's been my approach anyway.
As a leader, mate, what do you find is the most difficult component of leadership?
I would suggest, for me personally, because I'm not the Secretary of the Department of Industry. So my sphere of influence is what it is. But where I am involved in things, what it requires often, the projects I work on, is for people that don't have direct report lines to me. In actual fact, they don't even work for our department. They might work for state government. They might be in an industry group. They may be a business or a community group. And for me to get those people who could do lots of things with their time, to put their energy, effort, enthusiasm into something that I'm helping to perhaps lead and drive, when they can pretty quickly, easily drop that and do something else, it's to get those people to have some buy-in and roll up the sleeves and to make something work, knowing that in actual fact, I don't pay their wage, nor do they report to me, but you get them on board to form a team. So, the example recently, and I'm just cranking it up at the moment, for May this year, is the Hunter Innovation Festival, which I'm the chair of. This afternoon, sent an email out inviting my working group, which is about 8 or 9 members of the Hunters Innovation ecosystem, to join me in supporting our festival coordinator to run a really fantastic festival between the 6th and the 22nd of May this year. These are people from local government. They're involved in innovative startups, from university, from a range of organisations that, in effect, yes, this is directly related to their day job, but they're going to push in and go the extra mile to make this festival work. And me talking to them, helping them, leading them to assist us to make that festival, that can be a challenge because they can get busy. or they can lose their perhaps drive to do it. And so for me, it's constantly engaging people to keep them involved and get that team to form, and then try and get us to the finish line, and then celebrate at the end is obviously pretty important. So for me, that's the most challenging part I deal with from time to time, is working with a team of people that actually don't directly report to me, which, is a skill that's, maybe underrepresented possibly. Yeah.
Interesting in that this is the first time I'm hearing the connection between being a leader and having a group of followers that don't necessarily have any other reason to be connected to you other than they have a shared vision. And if you've provided in that vision, it seems like you've got whatever the formula is to get people on board. It seems like you've got it. If you're running a festival from, what did you say, the 6th of March till the 22nd?
6th of May to the 22nd of May.
That's a big period of time.
It is. Last year we had over 45 events, 3,000 people turn up.
Wow.
What I try to do is, everybody's in the back of their mind got their own KPIs they got to meet. And so with a festival like that, what I try to do is draw back, what are you going to achieve out of helping to make this happen? So local government get their bit of, they get what they need out of it. So that's one important thing, is I'm not dragging these people to do things they don't want to do. It's maybe a little bit of extra work, but the long-term play for them is they get really well known in the ecosystem. They meet the people they need to meet, and maybe they tick off a few daily KPIs that they also need to tick off as part of their day job.
How do you as a leader measure success, Tim?
In the sporting world, the immediate answer is premierships. So you day it all happens. So as I said, I coach junior and senior teams. Last year in particular, the last 2 years, the senior team, we won a grand final and then we lost the grand final. Whether both of those years were successes or not, I would suggest they both were. Last year we set up the team for success for this year because we played a lot of younger players, got some time into them, got some experience under their belt, and whereas the team that beat us on the day went with the same old crew they've had for 10 years. And so on the day, got us by a goal. You have a bit of a mope, but this year we're raring to go. So, it's not always ultimate success isn't getting a trophy and a trophy at the end of the day. At junior sport, where I coach my daughter's junior under 12s, we were never in the running for any cups. But I got a group of girls, half of the team had never played AFL before. My success on that is this coming season, they've all signed back up. They're all keen. They're all interested in AFL. There's a local girl from Newcastle that's been recruited to the big time, the AFLW. They follow her. They want to go down and watch her. So I've done my job in junior sport by getting people active, getting them to enjoy their time at sport, and from my point of view, get them to love the game of AFL. So there's different, I guess you'd have success means different things. At work, primarily my role is to provide grant support for companies. And so, yes, in the Hunter, we thankfully got a good economy, a good industry where we're able to find a lot of matches for the programs that we deliver. So, I give a little sneaky pat on the back every now and then when I've been partly responsible to a company being supported, whether it's a small grant or a very, very large grant. That gives you a bit of a warm fuzzy. And leadership, if you relate it back to people, I don't know that you could say it's the people stay under your command and that there's a long-term tenure. Because in actual fact, that saying about what do you do with someone, train them up and then watch them leave, or there's only one thing worse, and that's not training them, have them stay. So developing people, I enjoy where I have influence to be able to develop people's skill set. Now, that's some things that I like. If they can work hard and have a good time at the same time, I think that's a pretty successful sort of role.
Thank you for sharing that, because I guess that brings the nuance of success can mean different things at different points in your life. I think you've mentioned a few times that, your work is not necessarily focused on being a leader, yet what it sounds like you're doing by working on the networking side of things is you create your own leadership space because people are drawn to do things with you, whether that's on a voluntary basis or whether that's through the network through your current role. So sometimes it's what's in a name. You can have any kind of particular role description, and really if it's what you do in the job that separates you out from being a leader versus a non-leader. You made that fairly clear in your responses. So I appreciate the distinction between the two. And I guess I'm hoping in future podcasts that I can talk to more people that are in that sporting arena to get to see if they say the same kind of things that you're saying, because I guess having think you said before, you played the game, and now that you're coaching the game, I think if you see it from both those perspectives, it gives you something very different to bring to a group of kids or a group of adults than you might not otherwise be able to bring.
And we said before we came on air, in terms of the sorts of things that I do and where I live and, my work history over the past 15 years, that there's potential. I mean, there's always potential, but there was potential that I was quite ambitious and I studied and worked hard and those types of things. And perhaps I could be a leader, whether it's, in the private sector or public sector. But I'm careful to get that balance right. Having a young family, I've made it a conscious decision that I can have the job that I have, which I really, really quite enjoy, live in a region I want to live in, spend as much family time as I possibly can. And so I just want to get that balance right. And so, leadership for me is in roles are in sport coaching and in the activities that I lead in terms of innovation networks and those types of things. Someone who needs that feel, I need to have lots of balls rolling at once. So if I was just regional manager, I was industry-based Newcastle, that wouldn't fulfil me entirely. I just need a little bit of everything happening all at once, which this job allows me to do, which is fantastic.
Okay, Tim, look, just a couple of questions I've got here, just statements more, and to see what your view on them are. And here's the statement. On-the-job experience develops better leaders. What's your thought on that?
Is there a definitive answer to that? So in my opinion...
No. So just for the sake of the podcast, there's never a right or wrong answer here. Just based on your experience, you can say whatever you like, mate.
Started my public service career, at least, was kind of pretty steep educational sort of part, because as a graduate within a department, they do roll you through quite a number of things. We were trained really well. We did some leadership modules and some management modules, but I wasn't ready for anything. I needed to actually get my teeth into a little bit of it. So I would have thought, yes, you need a little bit of balance, but on-the-job experience is certainly necessary to, as you said earlier, in terms of some mistakes you might make and what are you going to do as a result of those mistakes? Have you got the resilience to deal with the real world? Things look great on paper until you get people involved, and then it and then it changes. So you certainly need to experience things. As I said earlier, have a crack one day, see how it results, and learn from that, and bring something better the next day. So I definitely agree that you need some on-the-job experience to become a well-rounded leader.
So here's the other side. What is your view on formal education helps to develop better leaders?
As well, absolutely necessary. I did undergraduate program. I don't know about it, but I started uni when I was 17, 18, 19. I turned up, got good marks, got my degree. Was I ready to bring any of that stuff to real life? Probably minimally. Very young. Whereas then when I go back and do an MBA, and then I'm reading textbooks because I want to know what's at the end of it. I think perhaps when you're younger, you're reading it to get the marks to get the paper, whereas doing that formal experience when you've had some runs on the board and you really want to achieve the educational outcomes and the learning and the knowledge, that's super valuable. I learned a whole heap doing an MBA. MBAs have gone up and down in terms of are they the thing to do, are they not to do. It hasn't progressed my career because I'm with the same department. I'd probably have the job regardless if I had an MBA. But certainly the things that I learned in that course were beneficial to me. And what I've tried to do is continue to take opportunities for educational experience. If you're not looking at what's on the horizon, then you can fall behind pretty quickly. Even just on example might be the technology. If you fell asleep, with some of the tech that's coming through at the moment, well, you're just going to fall behind so fast. And it's the same with leadership and management expertise. You might have read your textbooks 20 years ago, but if you're not keeping yourself up to speed, well, you might as well have an iPhone 1, or it's sort of, you've just got to continue to learn. Otherwise you don't get any better.
Yep. No, I fully agree with that statement, sir. So here's the last statement. Leaders are born, not made.
I don't know that I've got a strong viewpoint on it. I'm almost certain that you need, whether it's a mentor or whether it's someone within your life, whether it's someone like your father or someone that you've worked for early in your career. I'm certain that you need some strong influences to show you and demonstrate what a leader is, and to make it attainable. You can't do what you can't see. So you could study for years on end management and leadership, and then, as I said earlier, enter people and technology and operations and all the things that make up being a leader into those things. And your textbooks might fall apart pretty quick. So I would say that's quite possibly maybe the family you're born into might be helpful to you in terms of becoming a leader. But, there are people that like you said earlier, maybe not in leadership positions, may not see themselves as a leader, but they were born for leadership, especially sporting environment. I see that often. There might be a player that doesn't say a lot, but when he talks, everyone listens. And to me, that's displaying leadership. And maybe they haven't had neither significant experience nor the education, but perhaps they were just born to lead. And you see opportunities of that. So if you weren't born for it, I think you work your way towards it. And if you were, you're still going to work at it.
So this is one that I'm asking, and we're almost done. That I asked podcast guests based on the studies that I'm still finishing at the moment. So I'm looking at two key leadership capabilities. And I just wanted to get your view on them, not whether or not you support that in my study. Obviously, not why I'm going to ask you the question, but the two capabilities I'm looking at is strategic thinking and foresight as being probably the most critical leadership capabilities for future leaders. What would be your view on that in terms of strategic thinking and foresight?
Critical. If you're going to get buy-in on what you're trying to lead, I think there's got to be that bigger picture in terms of the end goal of what you're trying to achieve. But you've got to be strategic in the way you go about it. Yes, you can have a little ad hoc, and yes, you can fly by the seat of your pants. But you need to have, and you need your those that are perhaps with you as a leader to be really clear on where you're headed and how you're going to get there, and have the ability to make changes when things stuff up, when things don't work, when whatever happens to come along. So, careful planning and strategic thinking, I would have thought are pretty critical. And bringing your experience as to why perhaps you've been either pushed to the top or found yourself at the top, leading whatever project it might happen to be, your experience and your ability to lend your foresight to whatever project you're working to. I agree, but both pretty critical elements to it, I would have thought.
Thank you for sharing that. And again, with those two, they're not the only two leadership capabilities, obviously, but from my perspective, I think of the two, strategic thinking, if a leader doesn't have that, or at least can envisage what an end goal is going to look like and maybe what that pathway looks like, you're not really leading, if you take my meaning. Tim, final question. What might you say to a younger version of yourself about being an effective leader?
Well, I'd like to think I'm not too old anyway. What would I say to a younger version about effective leadership? For me, you mentioned it earlier. You said when we're talking about work-life balance, and I'm not suggesting in any way I've got it perfect. I prioritise the best I can. My wife would say sometimes you're not prioritising exactly the right order. So for me to be an effective leader, I juggle a lot of balls a lot of the time. Talked about sport, talked about the day job, talked about the fact that I run some committees and things. I train for triathlons and compete in triathlons regularly. And so fitting all of that in, what I haven't done is get the priorities right, whether that's sometimes on what I should be spending my time on, or which project's more important, and who to bring on potentially to assist to get that project to be completed. Just what I find myself more and more often doing with things that I work on is I purposely choose to work with people who can get shit done, because you know them and you meet them and they just churn it out, and then you'll work with someone else. And for whatever reason, and this is especially the case because I don't have, for often projects I'm leading, I'm not their direct report. I don't pay their wage. You get people that like adding stuff to their CV, like turning up to meetings, liking, going to the celebratory things. But as a leader, that's really hard when you've got people that are just on it for the ride. I more selective as the older I get to work with people that are can-do people and do what they say they're going to do. The old saying about want something done, give it to a busy person. That's what I'd tell myself, because over the years, I'm certain that I've tried to lead and I've worked on things with people and places. It's just never going to happen. And when you're trying to juggle a bunch of balls and you're trying to prioritise what project can be completed in a certain time, in effect wasting time with certain places and certain people, I'd tell myself, just sort out who are the guns and match yourself up with them and make it happen. Because yes, if they directly report to me, I can work and develop. But if I don't, and they're not really my people, well, I just struggle with people that fluff around and don't get much done. So that would be my advice. Find good people and work with them.
That's an excellent way to end the podcast, mate. So for the listeners, this has been Eric Perez having a chat with Tim Cotter. Again, thank you, Tim.
No trouble.
Mate, thanks again for your time. And for those listening, thank you for joining us on another Talking Leadership podcast.